What's your reaction when you just hear the boos from the crowd or some of the chants that are going on in a game like that?
That's 12 years for them, for sure. You know, that's a lot of deep that's pent up in the fans, and that's okay.
Did this team quit on that game at that point?
I don't think so.
In the third, but
And did we quit?
I don't know. In the second, I'm asking about the second.
I don't think so.
Listen, I'm not going to sit here and bash the coaches, Mike. I'm not going to talk about us quitting. I'm not going to talk about Donnie and us not listening. That's not right.
Well, he's not on the ice playing, right? So that's on us. He sends guys over the boards, and if they're not doing their job, it's not on him. It's on us.
This is not an easy league. It's an unforgivable league. If you are off at all, it is going to get shoved down your throat really hard. And that's exactly what happened tonight.
Thought Kyle Oposo spoke really well considering the tough circumstances surrounding Buffalo's loss to Columbus on Tuesday. You know, so far this season, 4 coaches have been let go. Is it possible that Don Granato of the Buffalo Sabres is next? It seems like the fan base is looking for that to happen. Let's bring in our hockey insider, Pierre LeBrun, resplendent in a gorgeous Dallas Cowboys holiday sweater. First of all, Pierre, thanks for being on the show. Oh my goodness, it lights up! It lights up, everybody. This is incredible. Pierre, where did you find this thing?
It was a gift from my lovely wife last year for Christmas, and I better turn that off because I don't want to blind you. But yeah, I like to wear it at holiday parties. I wore it recently at a party, and it was well received.
I would say that makes perfect sense. And we're going to get to your Cowboys in a little bit. We're going to ask you about them because we love to ask you about the North America's team. But you wrote about coaching changes in The Athletic on Wednesday. You had an article about it in The Athletic. You and I both saw what happened in Buffalo on Tuesday night, the fans chanting, "Fire Granato." Tough situation. I thought Oposo spoke really well. Mike Sullivan also potentially on the hot seat in Pittsburgh. I know they don't want to go that route, but it has been such a tough season there. Pierre, are either of these guys, in your opinion, close to being relieved of their duties at this point?
Yeah, let's start with one and then we'll get to the other. You know, in terms of Don Granato, there's a couple of things that you have to think about before you answer that question. One is that he signed a contract extension last October, so, 14 months ago, Jay. That doesn't actually kick in until next season. So he signed it quite in advance. Now, it's only a 2-year extension that kicks in next year, and it's just under $2 million a year. So in some ways, that's pocket change, for an NHL team that pays players way more than that. But I do think it's worth pointing out that his extension hasn't even kicked in yet. So that's number one. Number two is Kevin Adams has really spoken glowingly about Don Granato several times ever since he hired him and then extended him, about sharing the same vision about how to develop players and where this team was heading. So I think that's pretty genuine from Kevin Adams, the GM, when he has said those things. But at the end of the day, if the team doesn't get out of this spiral, and we're still talking about this in a couple of weeks, it might be difficult not to. And at the end of the day, Kevin Adams has to manage up too, right? He has people to answer to above him. So, I don't think he wants to fire him, but we'll see how the Sabres fare. It doesn't get easier. You got the Toronto Maple Leafs with half the building cheering for the Leafs tomorrow night in Buffalo. Now with Mike Sullivan, again, extension, because these things are important. They're real life. Mike Sullivan in the August of 22, Jay, signed a 3-year extension that doesn't kick in until next season. He signed it like 2 years in advance. That extension, a 3-year extension, is worth around $5.5 million US a year, making him one of the highest paid coaches in the NHL. I mean, listen, MLSE paid Mike Babcock for 5 years, $5.8 million a year not to coach. So I guess anything's possible, but it would seem to me that it would have to be a really dire situation for Mike Sullivan to get fired by Kyle Dubas. Number two, Kyle Dubas came out recently and gave him a real vote of confidence. Number three, Mike Sullivan is still regarded as one of the best coaches in the NHL. So, the only way I could see a change there is if another team actually came to the Penguins after the season, Jay, and said, we know that extension's about to kick in and we really like Mike Sullivan, let's talk. That would be the one scenario. But right now, I don't see any evidence that Kyle Dubas doesn't want Mike Sullivan as his head coach, despite his team being 13th in the Eastern Conference.
And you make such a great point. I mean, if they don't fire Sullivan, Pierre, what can this team do to turn around what's been an unbelievably disappointing season in Pittsburgh?
Well, I guess it has been for a lot of people, Jay, but I got to be honest. I said it on my Got Your Back podcast at the start of the year, and Mike Johnson agreed with me. I wasn't that high on this team. I know they went out and got Erik Karlsson, and obviously a wonderful addition, but this is an aging core with a lack of depth. And, despite the fact that Sidney Crosby is still an unbelievable player, having another unbelievable season.
Absolutely.
You can't do it single-handedly. And the reality is there's just not enough there on this team. I didn't have them making the playoffs this year, Jay. And listen, they could still make the playoffs. There's lots of hockey left, and I never bet against number 87, but I'm not surprised, is my point. Now, the one thing to key on here is Kyle Dubas, when he met the media in Pittsburgh for the first time since training camp recently, said that he would reevaluate his team around the All-Star break in early February. And that kind of caught the attention of some people around the league. Like what does he mean exactly? And I don't think it was cryptic. I just think he's saying, hey, if we're out of it come the All-Star break, then obviously we're not adding, and maybe it's time to start looking to the future. Easier said than done. Chris Letang, full no trade, signed long term. Karlsson still has term, full no trade. Evgeny Malkin, full no trade. It's difficult to rebuild this team in a hurry. This is going to be a long process in Pittsburgh. Here's the only contract that matters in Pittsburgh. Sidney Crosby has a year and a half left on his current contract. That's the magic moment. Are the Penguins still good enough to contend in a year and a half? How does number 87 feel about it, and where does Kyle Dubas go from there? That's really the only thing you need to remember.
Let's talk about the Carolina Hurricanes. It's been an up and down season, Pierre, as you know, and we also know that for Tom Dundon, it's like a financial vortex in Carolina. They just do things differently than the whole rest of the league when it comes to goaltenders and how they play their players, and certainly for their head coach, who's never really had a long-term deal, Rod Brind'Amour, even though he's a living legend. Dundon keeps saying, well, I'm going to take care of him, but he doesn't have a contract, after this season. Is there actually a possibility, Pierre, that Rod Brind'Amour might not be the Hurricanes head coach at the end of the season?
Well, you have to, Jay, sorry to interrupt. You have to say it's a possibility because he's on an expiring deal and he's not been extended yet. And he's the only head coach of that handful of coaches that started the year on expiring deals that is still in that position. I mean, DJ Smith was, but he got fired. Todd McClellan got extended. Lindy Ruff got extended. But here's Rod Brind'Amour, one of the best coaches in the league. And when I say one of the best coaches in the league, Jay, I have had other NHL front offices literally tell me, if this guy hits the free agent market, we would probably consider making a coaching change just to have a chance at him.
Wow.
This guy is so well regarded. But Rod Brind'Amour has been his own worst enemy in the past when he's been quoted saying, I don't know if I could coach anywhere else but Carolina. And that's one of the reasons I know everyone likes to pile on Tom Dundon for not paying Rod Brind'Amour the going rate. I mean, I think Brind'Amour makes around $2 million or just north of $2 million a year, should be making, $4 to $5 million a year. But when the coach comes up himself and says his life's in Carolina, obviously that's going to affect your leverage. So it's an interesting situation. It's yet to be resolved, and they had a huge, impressive victory over Vegas on Tuesday night, but they need to steer the ship here. This is a team with much higher aspirations than fighting for a wild card spot.
Well, it seems like a perfect way to segue into the fact that you guys have been talking about goalies on Insider Trading, and our buddy Chris Johnston put out another big board for potential trade targets on The Athletic on Wednesday. 4 goalies in the top 30. Jake Allen of Montreal at 4, Antti Ranta and Kaapo Kähkönen at 12 and 13, and then a real intriguing one at number 30 in John Gibson. We talked about it with Frankie Corrado on Tuesday, Pierre. For a team like the Edmonton Oilers, are those options, and I know Gibson would maybe take more than the rest of them, but are those options worth parting with valuable pieces to potentially put someone new between the pipes?
So Jay, that's not only an excellent question, it's probably the question that has dominated the NHL season so far, not just in Edmonton, but around the league. The subject of goaltending, the subject of front offices struggling to identify how to judge goaltending. I'm serious when I say that. Like, the goaltending position has never felt more like the Wild West than it does right now around the NHL. It used to be 2/3 of the teams in the league, there was that sense of comfort in knowing who your one was and that there was stability there. I will tell you right now, from talking to teams around the league, the number of teams that probably feel that way for real, I mean, they might say something different publicly, but for real, is probably 8 or 9 out of 32 teams. So just number one, the whole goalie thing is bizarre these days. And we saw it last year in Vegas, needing 5 different goalies to win the Cup over the course of the season. You can lump Edmonton with Carolina and New Jersey all together as teams that could use a goalie upgrade for sure, have talked about it internally, have made a few calls around the league, but I think struggle to say, yeah, that guy's definitely better than, definitely going to make a difference for us because of what I just talked about.
Yeah.
It really is a fascinating time in the NHL. Now, having said all that, you know, I personally think Jake Allen, for example, could be an interesting ad for me for either New Jersey or Carolina if the price wasn't exorbitant. You know, I don't know about Edmonton. Jake Allen has a 17 no trade list. We don't know for sure who's on that 17 no trade list, but I'm just going to point out the captain obvious part of all this. Most often those lists are populated by Canadian teams.
Yep.
That doesn't mean a player can't waive, right?
Yep.
But I'm just going to point that out. John Gibson is a fascinating name because of his pedigree, but the remaining part of that contract, 3.5 years at $6.4 million a year, the Ducks would really have to eat some of that to entice a trade in my mind.
The perfect solution for Edmonton, Pierre, would be for Jack Campbell to have lit it up in Bakersfield in the American Hockey League. They call him back up. Everybody's happy. The problem is he continues to struggle in the American Hockey League. What do you think is going to happen with Jack Campbell?
I mean, you mentioned it. I can tell you internally in that Oilers front office, they would love to see that comeback story. That's obviously what they hope can still happen. But the only two options otherwise, given that contract, there's only two options. Either you trade him and you pay an incredibly hefty price for a team to take that contract, i.e. attach a first-round pick to Jack Campbell and literally get nothing in return, which is just the price of business, right? Or you know, if he's not injured, you buy him out in the summer, which is also a huge cap issue. So there's no easy way out of this one. Here's the one thing I will say, though, for everyone hammering the Oilers for signing Jack Campbell that summer a couple of years ago. And obviously it's been a complete disaster of a signing by any measure. Who else would you have signed that year on July 1st?
Yep.
And I do this exercise a lot because I think it's easy to say, shouldn't have done that, but you got to make sure you have the answer of what you should have done. And the reality is it wasn't a great summer for the goalie carousel. Now, obviously, Darcy Kemper was available that summer. He signed in Washington. He's having an excellent year right now for the Caps. So he would have been the better answer for sure if he was interested in going to Edmonton. But I got to tell you, I went back and looked at the list of free agent goalies, and it was not very enticing that summer. And that's, you know, it's just something that you have to point out when you have these discussions.
I think it's a great point. Boy, it has been a bizarre season. I mean, Colorado seems to be in disarray, Pierre. Here's Devon Taves venting Tuesday night after a loss, and this was really interesting. Take a listen.
I mean, it's self-awareness. We need guys that know how to play in our system, how to play our game, and know what it takes. And if we have guys in here, I think we got some guys that think they're playing well, and I think they're kidding themselves at this point. It's frustrating to play with. Play out there when you got guys that think they're playing well and they're doing things that, you have no idea what play they're going to make or where they're going to be on the ice. And it's tough to play in this league when you don't know where your teammates are going to be. So, that's where a lot of the frustration stems from.
We've got guys who think they're playing well and they're kidding themselves. I mean, that was very pointed from Devon Taves. And then, Pierre, last week, Mikko Rantanen sounding off about something Arturi Lekkonen's dad said about him. What's your read, Pierre, on what's going on in Colorado?
Well, I think what Rantanen said was some Finnish player's dad. He didn't even mention Lekkonen by name. But anyway, listen, I think they're going to be fine, but there's a couple of things I want to touch on there. First of all, great on Devon Taves for being so honest, and that's leadership, by the way. When a core player is willing to say that, frankly, you don't get that a lot in the NHL from hockey players. And I don't blame most players. They don't want to be a headline. But that was tremendous leadership for me right there. This team's won a cup, right? The other thing I would say, and I think this gets forgotten because he's been away for so long from the team now, but Gabe Landeskog is their captain.
Yep.
And I got to tell you, I was just talking to someone the other day with the organization, and they said, man, you can't put into words what that guy's leadership and character has meant to us over the years and how much we miss him. And that's pointing out the obvious, I get it, but I'm just saying to those who don't follow the Avalanche every day, they've lost their heart and soul player. They haven't had him for nearly 2 years. And it's not even clear if he'll be able to come back or not in time for the playoffs, by the way. It's still up in the air, but we sure hope so. But I'm just saying, that's a key leader that's not there in a room to say, guys, let's do this the right way. So at the end of the day, the other thing I would say here is I think the Avalanche, after trading away Thomas Tatar last week, not a big trade, but keep an eye on them. They want to win another cup, and I believe they'll be as aggressive as any contender ahead of March 8th, the trade deadline, to try and go get a top 6 forward.
Wow.
I don't think they're going to sit on their hands. I think that they want to add. It's not easy. I mean, they've dealt away some futures over the last couple of years, obviously winning a cup and going for it.
Yep.
But I think they certainly will try.
Really quickly, how are you feeling about North America's team heading into Sunday against Miami? Oh, yeah, that's my answer right there.
Well, this is the sweater. No, I wouldn't be wearing this in Miami because I'd probably be sweating too much. But I think they'll rebound. I actually thought the Bills would win last week. I actually said that on Overdrive, Jay, so I'm not making that up after the fact. I just thought the Bills were playing for their lives and had so much more at stake. But I think they rebound in Miami. The weather's nicer for the Cowboys. They like that. It's going to be a shootout. But the Cowboys win. And what we really need, Jay, is a Tommy DeVito miracle in Philadelphia with the New York Giants. That's what we need here.